Committee on Homeland Security, Subcommittee on Oversight, Investigations, Accountability, and the Subcommittee on Border Security and Enforcement will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare the committee in recess at any time, any point. The purpose of today's hearing is to examine the consequences of the Biden administration's abuse of immigration parole and how Congress and the Trump administration can work to address those consequences. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Good afternoon again. Welcome to the Subcommittee on Oversight, Investigations, Accountability, and the Subcommittee on Border Security and Enforcement's joint hearing on returning immigration parole to its proper statutory purpose. First, I would like to thank our witnesses for being here today. This hearing was originally planned for April 8th. However, due to last-minute and unforeseen circumstances, it had to be postponed until today. And we appreciate our witnesses' understanding and grateful you can be here to talk about this important matter. On the note of witnesses, unfortunately, due to a flight cancellation, one of our witnesses, Charles Marino, will not be able to join us today. I would like to welcome the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Carter, who will serve on the Oversight, Investigations, and Accountability Subcommittee for the 119th Congress, and we look forward to working with you. We are here today because Congress must find a legislative answer to prevent the future abuse of parole, whether that means changing the standard for parole, expediting removal of paroles, or eliminating parole access to welfare benefits. We must act so that another administration cannot repeat or even worse, expand what occurred during the Biden-Harris time period. From February 21 to February 2025, under the Biden-Harris administration, U.S. Customs and Border Protection encountered more than 11 million illegal aliens nationwide. According to our witnesses today, nearly 3 million individuals who had no legal reason to be in the United States were allowed through an unlawful mass parole program, were paroled into and by an overwhelmed Border Patrol. We don't know how many people actually entered through these various unlawful mass parole programs because the Biden-Harris administration refused to give us numbers and data, and that's even after former Chairman Green issued a subpoena for the data. Why are they hiding the numbers? Because parole was out of control, and it would have been a political disaster if the American people knew how bad it was. And they abused this authority in support of an open-ended borders agenda. Congress created immigration parole to provide temporary entry into small numbers of aliens on a case-by-case basis. Started 60 years ago, and it was designed to be for a significant public benefit, this case-by-case temporary pause in normal processing, or a urgent humanitarian reason. Presidents and cabinet-level officers in the past have used it to enable essential witnesses to cross the border, testify at criminal hearings, or allow illegals with dire medical conditions to receive aid in American hospitals. One former senior ICE official has said that he paroled just 2 individuals in his entire career. No administration abused parole to such a degree and with such flagrant disregard for congressional limitation as compared to the Biden-Harris administration. While that administration, and then at the time Secretary Mayorkas, refused to provide Congress with clear information, their playbook was clear. The administration exceedingly expanded existing parole programs, such as the Cuban Family Reunification Program, to an amount that strained DHS screening and vetting capabilities. Second, the Biden-Harris administration reintroduced ineffective parole programs that the first Trump administration ended, like the Central American Minors Program. The Trump administration ended these because they served no purpose other than promoting greater illegal immigration and encouraging the exploitation of unaccompanied minors. Third, the Biden-Harris administration just invented new parole programs to release individuals from Afghanistan, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Colombia, Haiti into the interior, slapping parole on an inadmissible aliens file. Releasing them into the interior doesn't magically make one less inadmissible. It just means you're not following the laws intended. The parole vetting was so inadequate that one DHS Inspector General report found that 3 Afghan parolees had derogatory information related to felonies in the United States, and at least one had an indication of terrorism-related activity. An additional Afghan national who received parole through Operation Allies Welcome was arrested in my home state, in Oklahoma City, for plotting an election day terrorist attack for ISIS. While Republican members of this committee and millions nationwide recognize the national security threat of providing parole to poorly vetted immigrants, the Biden-Harris administration surged, making it even easier for more individuals to apply for parole through a CB1 application. We even found that during the administration that cartels hijacked that CB1 app to create appointments for would-be parole, for a fee, of course, so that the administration parole program was helping cartels pocket more dollars from desperate individuals. The Biden-Harris administration also raised the legal requirement for granting parole, allowing entry to individuals if they could find a sponsor who could financially support them once within the United States. Even though the law requires parole to be granted only on a case-by-case basis for urgent humanitarian reasons or significant public benefit. By law, that is what it stated before it was upended. Even when an internal DHS report indicated that thousands of potential parole sponsors were filing out fraudulent applications and supporting their financial statements with illegal income, the Biden-Harris administration continued accepting applications after just a month-long pause in their review of the program, and that did not last. If this wasn't bad enough, the DHS Inspector General published a report this month stating that during the Biden-Harris administration, DHS did not have a process to address parole expiration. Furthermore, DHS did not prioritize taking enforcement action for paroles who remained in the United States after their parole had expired, usually a 1-year or a 2-year time period. The report concluded that DHS had no assurances that paroles were lawfully present in the United States after their parole expired. When you apply these findings to the estimated millions of parolees let into the country during the Biden-Harris administration, it's very troubling that the administration flagrantly abused parole, and it has serious consequences that continues for the American people. While illegal immigration itself is a huge financial strain on the American taxpayer, parolees are especially expensive because they are eventually eligible for federal welfare benefits. One analysis found that beginning in January of 2026, that's 6 months away, the Biden-Harris parole calamity will cost about $3 billion a year in welfare benefits per 1 million parolees. $3 billion a year for just 1 million. And we know that we believe 3 million. So as the time period ticks on, we're looking at 9 billion, that's a state budget. That's an entire state budget. That's just the quantifiable cost. American citizens face serious national security and public safety costs and a lack of screening and vetting these parolees. The stories are becoming too many to count. Parolees have been charged and convicted of serious crimes, including terrorism, murder, rape, and sexual assault of children. Thankfully, the Trump administration has made it clear that inadmissible aliens hiding behind the fig leaf of parole can no longer hide under the protection of temporary parole and remain in the country. On March 21st of this year, President Trump announced his administration would revoke the parole status for 532,000. That includes the program for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, Venezuelans, more commonly known as the CHNV program. By returning parole to its proper purpose, the Trump administration can announce to the world and prospective immigrants that parole status cannot be gifted unlawfully and cheaply. More needs to be done. We're here today to determine how we can begin to undo these devastating impacts that illegal paroling did for untold numbers of inadmissible aliens into America and what that impact will be on our states and local communities. We must protect the taxpayer. We must protect the American people. We must protect our sovereignty. We need to further limit and clarify executive parole authority to prevent future abuses. I now recognize Ranking Member for the Subcommittee for Oversight, Investigations, and Accountability, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Thanadar, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon to all of you. First of all, I want to welcome the gentleman from Louisiana, Representative Carter. Thank you for joining the committee. We are honored to have you and honored to have your expertise. We're supposedly here today to examine the use of parole. Let's cut to the chase. President Trump has already ended all parole programs. Yet another cruel step in his immigration agenda. President Trump and Republicans are only interested in cruelty, chaos, and deflection. Republicans are really using this hearing to distract from the recent passage of their one big, ugly bill that is going to cut Medicaid and SNAP while increasing the national debt by trillions of dollars. Because Republicans don't want to face the future they created, where millions of Americans lose health care and food assistance, they prefer to live in the past and perpetuate false claims about President Biden's use of parole programs. Since Republicans seem to enjoy history so much, let's go back to 1956. That's when President Eisenhower first used parole to help 30,000 Hungarians come to the US after a failed revolt against communism. Parole has been used by every Republican and Democratic administration since it is a valuable tool to help those in urgent humanitarian situations. Parole programs also reduce illegal border crossing, increase the US workforce, and grow our economy. Given the benefits, the public might be asking why Trump is terminating parole programs. Is it simply because he is on a revenge and a retribution tour? Is it because he hasn't done enough already to shatter the economy? Or is it because he needs to turn parolees into undocumented migrants that cosplay Christie can then shackle and deport to a prison in El Salvador for a photo op? Trump and Noam are not focused on just violent criminals. They're arresting and deporting hard-working immigrants who wash dishes, pick crops, and construct homes. This administration is so desperate to achieve its goal of 3,000 arrests a day, it is targeting US citizens and lawful residents exercising their First Amendment rights, all while ignoring court orders. It is my Republican colleagues want to investigate immigration abuses, there is no need to relitigate false claims from the past. President Trump's daily actions are a continual assault on the Constitution that warrant congressional oversight. The American people are waiting for Republicans to stand up to the Mad King. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member. I now recognize the Chairman for the Subcommittee on Border Security and Enforcement, the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Michael Guest, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This afternoon, our hearing will provide a critical opportunity to investigate how the Biden-Harris administration systematically weakened our national border security and at the same time intentionally facilitated the influx of millions of inadmissible aliens into the United States through the unlawful use of mass parole. As members of the legislative branch, it is our duty to determine how and why the Biden-Harris administration abused its authority to grant parole meant to be applied only on a case-by-case basis for urgent humanitarian needs or significant public benefit to justify the mass release of between 2 and 3 million inadmissible aliens into our country. However, the Biden-Harris mass parole programs, though stopped by the Trump administration, continue to impose significant financial costs on the American public and generate increased public safety threats. During his time in office, former President Biden's open policies incentivized illegal immigration, signaling to the world that our borders were open. In response, people from around the world flooded across our borders and overran our communities. This resulted in historic, never-before-seen apprehension numbers. To combat the bad optics of the growing border crisis and to try to cover up the true scale of illegal immigrants entering the United States, the Biden-Harris administration created multiple mass parole programs to hide the truth from the American people and to quickly release individuals into the interior. These programs were deliberately designed to conceal and downplay the true scope of our border crisis. One of the ways the former administration misled the public was through the conversion of a little-known program originally designed to schedule cargo inspections into one of the most abused programs in our nation's history. The CBP-1 app was used in a manner never authorized by Congress to create a fast-track pathway for parole into the interior of the country. The implementation of the CB1 mass parole program resulted in nearly 1 million illegal aliens entering this country. This committee found that the individual who applied for entry into the U.S. using the CBP-1 app were ultimately released into the interior at least 95% of the time. Additionally, more than 500,000 other inadmissible aliens were granted parole under the mass parole program for Cubans, Haitian, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans. The Trump administration has wisely ended both of these programs by executive order, but the fallout remains. Earlier this year, DHS Office of Inspector General released a review of specific Biden-Harris administration parole programs, confirming that the previous administration had no plan to remove aliens whose parole had expired. That meant that there are potentially hundreds of thousands of inadmissible aliens who may still be at large in a country long after their parole has expired. To make matters worse, many of these aliens and those who sponsored their entry were not properly vetted. Both the CHNV program and the CBP-1 appointments had to be paused due to suspected rampant fraud. The consequences of these reckless and unlawful parole programs have been devastating, and the American public has paid the price. One horrifying example is the brutal murder of 22-year-old Laken Riley, an Augusta University student, at the hands of an illegal alien from Venezuela who was paroled into the country by the Biden-Harris administration. More recently, an Afghan national who was paroled into the United States in 2021 was arrested for plotting an attack in the name of ISIS on Election Day 2024. This arrest and Laken's tragic death should be a wake-up call to lawmakers that we must be serious about preventing future abuse of our immigration law. In closing, Congress has a responsibility to examine what steps should be taken to mitigate the ongoing financial and public safety threats enabled by the previous administration's abuse of parole. There is no scenario in which paroling millions of inadmissible aliens in the country is consistent with current law. We must never allow this to happen again. We must work together to ensure that future administrations can never again jeopardize our nation's safety and sovereignty. We must implement legislative solutions that will guarantee American security for generations to come. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today, and with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Chairman Guest. I now recognize a ranking member for the Subcommittee on Border Security and Enforcement, the gentleman from California, Mr. Lou Correa, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. Concur, words just said, need legislation to guarantee, to support American security, and American prosperity too. Gonna ask, what happened? What's going on, folks? President Trump got elected, said he was gonna deport criminals, those that have been in the country less than 2 years, and those with orders of deportation. Last I looked, 70% of the individuals being deported right now don't fit any of those categories. They're essentially hardworking individuals, many individuals that have been in this country 25, 30 years. My district, just a couple of weeks ago, man, been here 25 years, not a ticket to his name, not a traffic ticket, was apprehended by ICE. He's a gardener. 3 children, all serving in the U.S. Marine Corps. Let me repeat, man held by ICE, 25 years in this country, not a ticket to his name, not a traffic ticket, apprehended. He has 3 children in the U.S. Marine Corps. Now, I don't know about you, but we make movies about people like that. We give people like that a tour of the White House. Patriots. He raised 3 patriots that were ready to make the ultimate sacrifice for this country. What do you say to those 3 Marines? Spirit the Corps, keep up the good attitude, everything's going to be okay tomorrow. A lot of people in that situation. I know the president understands that this policy is hurting this nation economically. Just a couple of weeks ago, he came out and said, I'm going to suspend the deportation of those that work at farms, those that work in hospitality industry. 2 days later, he said, I was just kidding, never mind, we're going to continue to sweep them up. You know, each one of us represents a different part of the country, a different state. I'll tell you a little bit about California, and I've said this before, so please excuse me for repeating myself. It's important to note, California, a big portion of our workforce is undocumented. As a state, we've done everything we can to document those workers, driver's licenses, other things that we need to do. As a result, today, California is the 4th largest economy in the world. And if we deregulate a little bit, we could be number 3 in the world. Number 1 nationally on agriculture. 50 to 70% of those workers are undocumented. And we feed a lot of parts of this country and the rest of the world. We're also number 1 in manufacturing in Southern California. It's not Pittsburgh, it's not Michigan, it's Southern California. Manufacturing sector of the United States, center of manufacturing in the U.S. Guess what? A lot of those workers are what? Undocumented. I thought we were supposed to do some nearshoring to bring back a lot of those jobs from other parts of the world. That's what we were supposed to be doing. Let's talk about venture capital. Guess what state and union has about 60 to 70% of the venture capital today? California. Talk about high tech, Silicon Valley. A lot of those workers are, guess what? Visa holders. Overstayed visa. India, China, Europe. We attract the best and brightest. We have the best biotech in the world right now. We invent the best medicines in the world right now in California. As a result of that, folks, we pay $100 billion more in taxes to the federal government than we get back. I hear statements, burden. Well, no. We are a net donor to the federal government. And now the federal government is going to tell us how to run the economy of the state of California. Is that what I'm hearing today? Stop for a minute and I'll talk about undocumented. Let's talk about American citizens. I live in Orange County, not LA, Orange County. We have the National Guard downtown. Okay? Almost had the Marines there. Sheriff Barnes, who's been in this committee testifying, okay, has told me, I didn't call for backup. Local police, I didn't call for backup. Why are they here? They're messing things up, work that we've done for public safety for the last 30 years. And when they leave, we got a mess to fix. We didn't call for them. Go downtown Santa Ana right now where I live. It's peaceful. Why is the National Guard there? American citizens right now American citizens afraid of going out on the streets. Parents telling their kids, take your birth certificate. Take a passport. Are you kidding me? Is this America or is this a communist country? American citizens. Just 2 weeks ago, female attorney, American-born citizen, walking down the park. There was a raid going on. Turned around, they took her into. Arrested her. Never been so frightened in her life. She said, masked man grabbed me, put me in a van with no windows, took me in a holding cell that I had no idea where I was going. A few hours later, she was let go. Why? Was she profiled? Thought you weren't supposed to be doing that. Okay? Home Depot. Heard another story. An off-duty police officer walking into Home Depot. They were about to grab him. He turned around and said, back off. I got to conceal weapon. Can you imagine what we almost had? Almost had a shootout there because you have masked individuals, and I have no idea who they are. I have no idea what training they have, about to grab somebody without even a warning. These are our streets in the United States of America. What are we coming to? You know, the other day, President Trump was meeting with President Bukele. He said, quote, the president, homegrowns are next. You got to build about 5 more of these places. This place is not big enough. So we're sending American citizens now to foreign prisons? Forget about green card holders. I'll tell you, I've told them, do not leave the country. You will not be let in. What are we coming to, folks? What is going on? California is the 4th largest economy in the world. Our ag industry is getting devastated. I won't even talk about the trade that the ports of LA, Long Beach, the biggest ports we have in this country. I think their trade is down 30, 40%. This hearing is about parole, but I think the bigger issue is of our immigration policy. My colleague just said we need to legislate, protect American security. We've also needed immigration reform for a long time. And it's not only California. I've got some articles here talking about the Wisconsin dairy farmers. 70% of the workforce is undocumented. So you get rid of those workers, and I guess our milk will be less expensive, I would imagine, if you can get it at all. Another one here. Immigrants contribute greatly to the Social Security's trust fund solvency. They pay into Social Security, never get a dime back. Labor and immigration reform. Many dairy farmers struggle to recruit and retain native workers despite higher wages and benefits. But I guess we're going to take our graduate students and now tell them to go milk the cows and take care of the cows. That's what we're saying. This is an interesting one, a little bit off point. Irish tourist jailed by ICE for months after overstaying the U.S., his visa, by 3 days. By the way, tourism is a big industry in my district. They're down 20 to 30%. Dairy farms are vulnerable to Trump's mass deportation threats. The industry hopes to get a pass. All you have to do is read the newspapers every day. I'm not quite sure where we got off on this track. We're supposed to deport criminals. And I can tell you back home, I've talked to people who believed the president when he said he was going after these 3 sets. Criminals, overstays, those here with less than 2 years. And now, going after hard workers. Our economy is going to suffer. Inflation, shortages. Maybe the president doesn't know what's going on. he needs to know that ICE is doing more than maybe he knows we're doing. Look forward to hearing the testimony from our witnesses today. Mr. Chair, take over the gavel.
Gentleman yields. Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. I'm pleased to have a panel of expert witnesses before us today on this very important topic. I ask that our witnesses please rise and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give before the Committee on Homeland Security of the United States of the House of Representatives will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Thank you. I would now like to formally introduce our witnesses. Mr. Ken Cuccinelli is a senior fellow at the Center for Renewing America. Dr. Stephen Camarata is the Director of Research at the Center for Immigration Studies. Dr. David Beer is the Director of Immigration Studies at the Cato Institute. I thank the witnesses for being here today. I now recognize Mr. Ken Cuccinelli for 5 minutes of his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and ranking members and members of the committee. I will try not to repeat some of the data some of you have already talked about. I would go straight to the statute that provides legal authority for the granting of parole. There's only one statute. It's INA Section 212D5A. And particularly, it says the Secretary of Homeland Security may, in his discretion, parole into the United States temporarily under such conditions as he may prescribe, only on a case-by-case basis for urgent humanitarian reasons or significant public benefit. 4 conditions. 4 conditions. This is a change in 1996 in the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act, which was passed on an overwhelmingly bipartisan basis on a voice vote in the Senate, and by approximately a 10-to-1 margin in the House. This was the first time the case-by-case requirement was included in the parole statute. So the example of President Eisenhower from 1956 was executed under the 1952 version of the parole statute, which did not include the case-by-case language. Congress intentionally narrowed the parole authority in 1996 to require decisions on parole to be on a case-by-case basis, only on a case-by-case basis, to quote the statute. That is the most significant change in this statute in the 1996 amendments, and again, it passed on an overwhelmingly bipartisan basis. Despite that rather obvious limitation, the Biden administration created a series of new immigration admission arrangements without congressional approval, essentially making its own law, using the parole authority, sometimes explicitly and sometimes implicitly. The 2 words were used together in some of these statements already made today: parole programs. Well, parole program is an oxymoron. Parole is intended to be exercised on a case-by-case basis. You said so as an institution almost 30 years ago. The restrictions added to the parole authority in 1996 have never been fully litigated. Such a case was in process at the transition from the Biden administration to the Trump administration, but the case was withdrawn by the Trump administration and the district court ruling was vacated and dismissed. So we'll have our discussion here today, but there is not a high court ruling to point to interpreting the application of the case-by-case language. Normally, basic statutory interpretation You go to the plain language of the statute unless it's in some way unclear. Well, only on a case-by-case basis strikes me as extremely clear. But if Congress truly wants case-by-case to be applied one case at a time, then clearly even more explicit restrictions should be put in place. My suggestion would be to pick a number low enough that any competent Secretary of Homeland Security would want to be particular with each parole slot. I would suggest something around 3,000 a year. At that level, there would be no point in setting up so-called but misnamed programmatic parole arrangements, as they would reach annual limits so fast they wouldn't be useful for those purposes. America is reaping the financial and security costs of former President Biden's unprecedented and illegal importation of millions of illegal aliens. 2.5 to 3 million, it depends how you'd like to count them, using the parole power. And we will literally be paying those prices for decades to come. I know parole reform, as noted, I think it was by Congressman Correa, that parole reform is just but one of the immigration tasks you have before you and that require Congress attention if it's ever to be set on a proper long-term footing. But I'm happy to join you today and address this subject and answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Cuccinelli. That was excellent. You hit your time mark. You're seasoned in this. Appreciate that. I want to now recognize Dr. Camerata for 5 minutes for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee for having me here today. I'm Steve Camerata, Director of Research at the Center for Immigration Studies. As many of you pointed out, the Immigration and Nationality Act gives the Secretary of Homeland Security discretion to grant parole on a case-by-case basis for a limited number of people for a limited time to individual aliens for urgent humanitarian reasons or because that would create a significant benefit. It's not a program to be used en masse, and yet published data indicates that the Biden administration released nearly 2.9 million people into the United States using parole. It's very hard to see how parole granted on this scale could have been done on a case-by-case basis. Now, my testimony will focus specifically on the fiscal implications of this. Prior research is very clear that educational attainment at arrival is a key determinant of immigrants' fiscal impact because it not only determines what types of jobs they'll do, but also their likely income and their tax payments and use of social services. Census Bureau data indicates that 1 out of every 4 recent immigrants from the top parolee-sending countries lack a high school diploma, compared to just 6% for the U.S.-born. Also, new adult parolees are significantly less likely to have a college degree than the U.S.-born. As a result, the average wages of newly arrived immigrant men from these top parole-sending countries is only 44% that of U.S.-born men. Further, half of households headed by new immigrants from the top parolee countries access at least one welfare program. That's nearly twice the rate of the U.S.-born. Now, the budget reconciliation legislation that just passed states that parolees will no longer be, quote-unquote, qualified aliens after 1 year of residence. Qualified aliens have to live in the United States for 5 years to be directly eligible for many welfare programs. But my analysis of Census Bureau data showing high welfare use is confined to parolee countries who have lived in the United States for less than 5 years. So the designation of qualified alien is not the reason for the heavy use of welfare programs. So the removal of that designation isn't going to make much difference. The reason so many parolees use means-tested programs is, first, many are poor and have low income. Second, they can receive benefits on behalf of U.S.-born children. Third, all low-income residents of the United States can access some programs regardless of legal status. And finally, some states give benefits to otherwise ineligible aliens. In addition to traditional welfare, 40% of households headed by recent immigrants, again, from the top parole-sending countries, are poor enough to receive cash payments from the Earned Income Tax Credit. Parolees have work authorization and Social Security numbers, for the most part, so they can get the EITC. Again, the big, beautiful bill doesn't change any of this. Now, to be sure, immigrants from top parolee-sending countries with work authorization most certainly do pay some taxes. However, on average, parolee-headed households have only 47% of the federal tax liability of U.S.-born households. Now, having said this, the low average tax payment or high use of welfare by parolees should not be seen as some kind of moral failing on their part. Instead, the fiscal drain they create simply reflects the realities of the modern American job market, our progressive system of taxation, coupled with an extensive social safety net. It should also be pointed out that immigrant men from the main parolee-sending countries have relatively high rates of work. But that does not preclude use of welfare in any way, nor does it mean their average tax contributions will be large. Now, to be sure, by working and consuming in the United States, parolees do make the U.S. economy bigger. But it is a common mistake to confuse this with their tax contributions. Almost all of the increased economic activity they create goes to the parolees themselves in the form of wages, as it should, since they're the ones doing the work. In conclusion, the decision by the prior administration to grant parole on a massive scale will have significant negative fiscal impact for years to come, given all we know about the educational attainment of parolees. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Camarada. I now recognize Mr. Beer for 5 minutes for his opening statement.
Chairman, ranking members, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify. For nearly half a century, the Cato Institute has produced original research showing that people, whatever their ancestry, background, or birthplace, benefit the United States. Sadly, the U.S. immigration system is outdated, approving just 3% of immigrants seeking legal permanent residence last year. This fact has made temporary statuses like parole even more important as a way for legal entry. Since 1952, when Congress created the parole category, administrations have invoked this authority at least 126 times. Millions have entered legally as parolees and have contributed greatly to our country for decades. The parole processes created under the last administration were no different. The Congressional Budget Office estimates indicate that recent parolees will lower U.S. debt by more than $500 billion over the course of a decade. The current administration admits these recent parole processes were lawful and case by case, and that they reduced illegal immigration, but it terminated them anyway. Tore up promises to 1.5 million legal immigrants, stripping them of status with no warning. This chaos typifies the administration's mass deportation policy, which consists of 3 basic pillars. 1, strip people of legal status and U.S. citizenship. 2, arrest based on convenience and profiling, not threats. And 3, deport without due process. First pillar, parolees, temporary protected status holders, thousands of international students, and even some green card holders who haven't committed any crimes are having their status stripped away. They are even attempting to take away U.S. citizenship from many U.S.-born babies and threatening to do the same to many naturalized citizens. In some cases, they are taking away people's status explicitly to retaliate against their free speech. Millions losing their status isn't fixing illegal immigration, but that's not their goal. Their goal is to increase targets for deportation, paid for by us, the taxpayer. Second pillar, target based on convenience, not threat. ICE isn't prioritizing the worst of the worst. Parolees were and are continuously vetted. They aren't threats, they're just convenient targets. That's why ICE is rounding up those who are complying with the asylum process, attending court hearings, and not committing any crimes. 2/3 of those detained by ICE this year have no criminal conviction. None. Just 7% have a violent conviction. ICE agents themselves are sounding the alarm. Quantity over quality, said one agent, deprioritizing the real threats. Indeed, the White House has explicitly ordered them to stop focusing on serious criminals and conduct indiscriminate, random roundups at bus stops, parking lots, at Home Depot, and even churches. ICE is arresting over 10 times as many non-criminals on the streets as even under the first Trump administration in 2017. But you can't see someone's legal status, so this means blatant illegal profiling in violation of the Fourth Amendment. As one court has already found, they are detaining U.S. citizens for street interrogations and then wrongfully arresting them if they refuse to talk. Third pillar, after detaining without reasonable basis, they're deporting without due process. In March, the administration grabbed more than 50 people who entered America legally, never violated any law. It threw them on a plane and sent them to a foreign torture prison without a trial or so much as a hearing and in violation of a court order. The Supreme Court has already found these expulsions were unconstitutional, but DHS, it disagrees. The president is violating court orders, openly flouting U.S. law, and violating the First, Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, Eighth, 10th, and 14th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution. President Trump can certainly make America poorer, weaker, and less safe with his feckless, chaotic deportation crusade, but he cannot ignore the Constitution. The Constitution is our wall of defense against tyranny. It's the one wall we all should agree needs to be higher. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beer. Members will be recognized by order of seniority for their 5 minutes of questioning. Additional rounds of questioning may be called after all members have been recognized. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. Dr. Cameruta, you talked about the cost. I appreciate that. Dr. Camerata, what do you think is the total cost? And the last statement is forgetting that we are debt loading upon American children right now, and every expense that we are incurring is taking from the next generation of U.S. citizens. So what is that true cost that the one big beautiful bill that did address some things is not addressing, specifically the earned income tax credit? And of the 3 million illegals that came through under this process, what do you think that cost is per individual multiplied by 3 million specific to the earned income tax credit?
Yeah, so it has to run into the few billions. About 40%, based on the calculations the Census Bureau has done, of recent arrivals from those countries are eligible, have income low enough. And we would assume, since they have work authorization and have valid Social Security numbers, they can get that. And so that number has to run into the billions, maybe 2-3 billion in the value of the earned income tax credit. But we don't have a specific number.
Thank you. Dr. Cuccinelli, you have explained a lot about the process. You've got a lot of years of experience. We've heard from senior officials like the current CBP chief, Rodney Scott, that when he was at Border Patrol, he paroled only a handful of individuals during his entire career. How many people historically have been paroled into the country every year?
Prior to the Biden administration, you would be talking in the thousands as a general matter.
Thus your pronouncement of 3,000 as a good...
Yes, and it also, again, it makes irrelevant programmatic parole, but it also makes the leadership actually value the slots so that you really do look for real, indisputable humanitarian benefit, indisputable significant or humanitarian reasons, indisputable public benefit. And I would note, when I hear an example like Congressman Correa's example of the father of 3 Marines, that's a very sympathetic case. And I would respectfully suggest that you preserve parole for those cases. When you use it willy-nilly for 2-3 million people whom you barely vet, if at all, you don't end up with that quality of story 2 and 3 million times. So if you want to just bring in those good cases, I'll call them, then you need to restrict the availability of parole to the secretary and to every administration so that they're forced to use it for quality cases.
Let me shift gears relative to what happens once parole is provided, that designation. What happens to that individual in terms of the time period? They're then told to, some are told to show up to an ICE agent to be able to be given a notice to appear in an immigration court. But many of these ICE officers are so backed up by our understanding, it may be as long as 10 years. Again, some of these are 1 year, 2 year, in terms of the time period that should be allowable, can turn into many multiplied past that. That notice to appear, if it goes to the nth degree,
right.
How long does it take for these people to otherwise be processed, then final adjudication?
So Congressman Correa's other comment about how this needs to fit into the bigger immigration reform question falls right into your question here. So one thing that no one has talked about is how all of these otherwise illegal entrants clog the system for people who are playing by the rules, who have played by the rules all along. America is the most generous immigration country in the world. And that's the legal portion of what we do. And that is clogged up. That's where that 10-year backup number comes from. And the estimates, again, are different. Presumably, some of the money from the bill that just passed will be used to get more judges, more lawyers, et cetera, and to move those cases faster. But in the Biden administration, hey, come see us at the ICE office, they knew very well that a large portion of those folks would never show up, and in fact, they didn't. And so now we need to go find them just to end their parole and put them back in the status they were previously in and deport them where appropriate.
As it's commonly said, notice to appear turns into notice to disappear. I now recognize Ranking Member Thanedar for 5 minutes for questions he may have.
Thank you, Chair. We have a video.
Along Sunset and Western Avenue, there's cell phone video that you just saw. It captured the raids occurring at this Home Depot property. Also,
hands behind your back. Hands behind your back.
If you don't my hands, go ahead, put behind my back.
Smashing the rear window of this white pickup truck, and just moments later.
Yo, hey, he's bleeding, bro. He's bleeding from his head. Look.
Lining this area as children were playing.
Looks like ICE is out of control. The video we just watched is shocking. Armed and masked men with guns are roaming American streets, chasing down, tackling, and arresting people. We've seen federal officers raid Home Depot parking lots, swarm the fields where our crops are being harvested, and march across MacArthur Park in Los Angeles like a hostile military through a battlefield. Mr. Beer, based on your research and expertise, who do ICE and other federal officers appear to be targeting? And on what basis are they targeting people?
Well, it's obvious that they're engaged in illegal profiling. We know from reports that White House Deputy Chief Stephen Miller ordered that they stop developing target lists of criminals and to go out to the streets and just start arresting people. Tom Homan, again, White House czar on immigration, says they're doing profiling. They're going out. They're saying, you're a day laborer. We're going to detain you, even in absence of any reason to believe that you are in violation of any law.
Mr. Beer, Donald Trump claimed that he wanted to deport the worst of the worst criminals. If that is the case, why is Trump targeting people in Home Depot, parking lots, and agricultural fields and public parks? Are they all criminals?
There aren't enough criminal immigrants in the United States for him to fill his deportation quotas and get his millions of deportations that he promised people. And so what they are doing is they're going out and into the streets and profiling people. If you look at where all of the increase in arrests has come from, it's come from non-criminals on the streets. That means outside of a prison or a jail, they're going out and they're profiling people and they're arresting them. And that is resulting in all of the arrests that we're seeing in the conflict and chaos in the streets.
Thank you, Mr. Beer. It's not just that Donald Trump's agents are unconstitutionally and immorally profiling people based on the color of their skin. It's also that no one really knows whether they are encountering a federal officer or a thug. We have seen videos over and over again showing supposed federal officers with their faces covered by masks, scarves, and fabric. Mr. Beer, does it concern you that masked officers are patrolling communities, refusing to identify themselves and arresting people on the street? Does this make our country safer?
Absolutely not. It makes the situation less safe for both the officer and the person that they're interacting with in the public because they don't know, the person in the public doesn't know whether they're an officer or not. They could be a criminal, they could be another person, and that leads to more conflict. I have a long list of cases around the country of people who posed as ICE officers to commit crimes just this year, just in the last year. This is happening. And so there are good reasons for people to be careful when someone shows up with a mask and says, do what I tell you to do.
Thank you, Mr. Beer. Thank you for your testimony. And Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize Representative Guest for his 5 minutes question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cuccinelli, you mentioned in both your opening statement and your written testimony the applicable law that must be applied by DHS, by the Secretary, when parole is considered. The IRA, passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, 1996, signed into law by then President Bill Clinton, a Democrat. Again, easily passed the House, easily passed the Senate. And as I look at that law, it seems to me to set forth both the process and the standard. The process being that it must be applied on a case-by-case basis. Is there any part of the IRA that allows the law to be applied in a situation of mass parole? Can the Secretary just decide, I'm not going to follow the case-by-case, I'm just going to set forth these categories of people, and if you fall into this broad category of individuals, then I'm automatically going to assume that the process portion of that has been met?
No is the answer.
And it's clearly no, correct? It's not even close. There's no ambiguity as to what the statute says.
This is the only statute that contains any aspect of the parole authority. There aren't multiple statutes to look at, as we sometimes see in the immigration space. This is it.
And so the first part it says forth is the process, and then the standard says it must be on the basis of urgent humanitarian reasons or significant public benefit. Are there any more standards that the Secretary can choose to apply?
No.
So you mentioned there, and some of the questioning by Chairman Brecheen, you mentioned somewhat in your written statement too, that historically, prior to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Secretary Mayorkas coming into office and abusing this parole system, that historically, on an annual basis, the number of individuals who were granted parole were in the low thousands. Is that what I heard from you, Mr. Cuccinelli?
You did. There have been exceptions, but they tend to reach back before 1996.
You even mentioned a range in your written statement of 3,000 to 5,000. Can you expand on where that came from?
That's my suggestion as to how to bring this system under control. If you are going to have administrations that sometimes will simply not abide by the plain language of the statute Congress passed, then you need to put in harder, more objective limitations in place. If the alternative is complete unfettered discretion, which is how the Biden administration operated, or zero, there are reasons both of those are bad. So thus my suggestion in the 3,000 to 5,000 range of putting a hard cap on an annual basis on the Secretary of Homeland Security and how many people they can let in using this parole authority.
And so when you say 3,000 to 5,000, that's annually, correct? That's yes. 3,000 to 5,000 a year. I did some rough math. I took into account, said that there were 3 million people that came in and were paroled during that 4-year period. Divided by the number of days over 4 years, and at 3 million, that's over 2,000 individuals a day.
A day.
Each and every day, Monday through Friday, Saturday and Sunday, Christmas, New Year's, July 4th, that were paroled in the country. And then given the administration just the benefit of the doubt at 2.5 million. I did that math. That's 1,700 individuals a day, each and every day for 4 years. And so what you're telling me is that we should be shooting for a range of somewhere between 3 and 5. And let's just double that number just for argument's sake. Maybe we say 10. Maybe we say 20,000 is a good number. But we, in a given week, we're doing over 14,000 individuals in a given week. And so, Mr. Cuccinelli, just let me ask you, as my time draws near, based on what you know about the law, the standards and the process that must be met, did Secretary Mayorkas, did the Department of Homeland Security, under the prior administration, did they abide by the law or did they abuse the law that was given to them by Congress?
They rather obviously abused the law.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize Representative Correa for his 5 minutes of question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cuccinelli, we're going to see if this gentleman can get parole in place as father of these 3 American Marines. You mentioned we are our most generous nation. We are, but we also benefit tremendously from immigrants in any way possible. Einstein, well, all of us here are immigrants to this country. We made this country strong. But, Mr. Beardum, we hear a lot about the costs. We hear a lot about the cost benefits. I've been hearing this argument 30, 40 years. The costs. Are there any benefits to immigrants working in this country?
Of course, there are huge benefits to immigration. Look, without immigrants coming into the United States right now, our labor force would be in decline, and that would have devastating
It'd be another
consequences.
Japan.
Say that again?
We would be another Japan.
Yeah, and look, you can survive. Japan hasn't gone away, but they're poorer as a consequence. And so if you want to have a vibrant society, you want to have as many people contributing to it as possible. That's what the Founding Fathers understood from the beginning, is that people are the ultimate resource. They are a benefit to the country. There are economies of scale that happen when you have more people that come in, and those people end up doing more specialized labor, which improves living standards for everyone in the United States.
You know, I think about people trying to get into this country to work, and the draw. I don't think it's as much welfare as it is a good job. And, you know, I think I would propose that the easy way to solve a lot of this is penalize the employers. I mean, put them in jail, come down on them hard. Once you stop hiring folks, guess what? That job magnet goes away, right? I mean, you know, the last 2 or 3 years, you had people from Central America walking across the border, but it would take them $8,000 to $10,000 paying somebody to get them to the border, maybe across. So my proposition is, it's the jobs. This is why people come. This is why my grandfather came to build the railroads in 1900. It was a job. Go ahead, Mr. Beard.
Look at the immigration system. We have a guest worker program for lesser skill agricultural jobs, but only if they're seasonal and temporary. We have one for non-agricultural jobs that has a low cap. That's also only if it's seasonal or temporary. You look at all of the people who've come in over the last few years. Where did they go? They went into the year-round permanent jobs in agriculture, in manufacturing, in poultry processing, in other areas where there is no visa. There's no way for them to come legally. So yes, we need a legal way. Parole is one of those ways. We're hearing from the committee they don't like parole. I don't know why they don't like parole, but they don't like parole. So we'll call it something else. Call it a visa. Let them apply at a consulate. Let them come in legally. Let them contribute to this country. They don't need welfare, as you said, so let them contribute. I don't get it. What's the problem? We can solve this with a legal path.
I'm happy to work with my colleagues across the aisle to look at this cost-benefit. I always ask myself, what's the value of being energy independent in terms of national defense? Everybody here wants to be energy independent. What's the value of being food independent on an international basis? You want to import your food, be dependent on somebody else, or you good exporting it? And those are the issues I think we have to look at strategically. Where do you want to go as a country? But let's be honest about this cost benefits. I mentioned some of the articles, you know, Wisconsin, other parts. I just saw a map. The southern states of this country, heavily reliant on ag immigrant workforce, undocumented. So all I'm saying is let's just be honest and let that drive policy. Facts. Go ahead.
Well, you're absolutely right. And if you come back to this issue of parole, we keep hearing again and again how they were otherwise inadmissible or otherwise illegal. Look, everyone is otherwise illegal except for their status. So these people have status. They're already here. They're already contributing to this country. Why would we rip up their status, create all this economic turmoil?
If they have criminal record?
No criminal record. They're vetted.
But if they do, then you're not in. But if you're a hard-working person, then you're in.
Exactly.
Possible. Mr. Chairman, in the last seconds, I ask unanimous consent to insert into the record a number of articles describing contributions of immigrants to Social Security, American ag, the dairy industry, the labor force in general. These articles essentially highlight how these industries are dependent on undocumented economic labor force.
Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman yields. I now recognize Representative Strong for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to first thank our witnesses for being here today for their contributions to this critical discussion. Mr. Cuccinelli, according to the Department of Homeland Security, nonprofit organizations occasionally serve as sponsors on parole applications. How frequently do nonprofit organizations serve in this role, and what are the implications of their involvement?
I don't have exact numbers, but it is very common. They also do it. It isn't a one-off. So you have organizations that are being sponsors for large numbers of people. And I would just point out, this concept of sponsorship is as old as the American immigration system, but the fact of the matter is, in our adult lifetimes, sponsors have not, repeat, not, been held accountable to what are the supposed requirements of sponsors. And that has just never happened under any administration. So it's easy for the nonprofits or any individual to do this. We have individuals sponsoring scores of people as well, dozens, I should say, be the high end, which they could never financially fulfill the obligations if they were called on to do so for everyone they're sponsoring. So this whole system is broken, and thus it's very easy for a nonprofit to step in there as one part of its agenda to bring larger numbers of folks into the U.S.
Thank you. I'm glad to see that this administration is placing national security first and is taking the necessary actions to restore integrity and accountability to our immigration system. Mr. Cuccinelli, can you discuss the role that state and local law enforcement play in supporting ICE with parole removal orders, as well as any challenges that they see?
So first of all, this is all more work for all of them to do if they're willing to do it. Making the news all the time are the states and localities that refuse to cooperate with ICE, and under the 10th Amendment, the federal government can't simply demand local or state cooperation. Now, as your annual budget comes up September 30th, you can write it into the law. This was litigated in the first Trump administration, and without specific budget requirements tying cooperation to the cutting off of funding, then the federal government doesn't have a tool to compel this cooperation. For those that do cooperate, we famously we're seeing it in Florida, and we can go all around the country at the localities in many of your states that are cooperating. Yes, it's easier, believe it or not, to target the criminals because they pop onto your radar. They pop onto your radar. They may be 2.5%, 3%, 4%, 5% of the total population, and I've heard complaints that they're only 30% of those being deported. I would point out that they're 10 times their proportion in the population of illegal aliens being focused on. So that security and safety element is a priority numerically and proportionally.
Thank you. Switching gears a little bit, Mr. Camerota, you and I both know that America deserves an immigration system that prioritizes their interest in public safety above all else. Can you further expand on the physical burdens placed on American taxpayers when parolees begin receiving welfare benefits? And are there types of financial benefits that parolees qualify for that other illegal aliens do not?
Yeah, so especially with that qualified alien provision that now apparently, as I read the big, beautiful bill, is not going to apply. But the thing you have to keep in mind is that probably played some role, but what's driving the high use of public services is the low educational attainment of parolees and their low income, the presence of U.S.-born children, which isn't changing with the law, the fact that some states give them benefits, some programs are allowed to be used, like WIC and free school lunch and emergency Medicaid and Medicaid for pregnant women. So there are these other factors. In other words, if you had to, the bottom line is, people who come to America, even those who work, and as I point out, they have relatively high rates of work, if they have very modest levels of education, they make extensive use of the social safety net. And it's not because they're lazy, it's not because they all came to get welfare, it's just the reality of modern America. You have to be very selective or you're going to get kicked in the teeth in fiscal costs. That's just how it is when it comes to immigration.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Carter for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Like many Americans, I'm deeply troubled by the cruel and profoundly un-American mass deportation agenda being undertaken by the Donald Trump administration and his allies. These harsh policies are not about public safety or border security. We've seen children torn from their parents, flagrant disregard of basic due process protections, and individuals targeted for exercising their First Amendment rights. Congress must do what we can to uphold the values of our founding fathers and the rights of all people in the United States. We need immigration policies rooted in dignity, fairness, and most importantly, due process, not cruelty and authoritarianism. Despite campaign promises, the vast majority of those detained or deported under this administration, have had no criminal record. Many of these individuals have lived here for years, raised families here, and contributed to our communities. In New Orleans, my hometown and district, just weeks ago, Madonna Kashanian, an Iranian woman who's lived in the United States for almost 5 decades with no criminal record, was gardening outside her home when ICE agents detained her. I'd like to commend my friend and colleague, Majority Leader, Congressman Steve Scalise, who worked with me to get her released. Yeah, I said Majority Leader Steve Scalise, who worked to have her released. Congressman Scalise said, and I quote, "She's been a great member of this community. She's done a lot for the people, and her life work is what she should be judged on." This was said by a Republican, by your leader. I agree with this sentiment, and I hope that my Republican colleagues that see this and know that they should too treat every human being seeking a better life in this country the same way. Steve Scalise, Majority Leader, Republican, said that we have to have a better process, that we shouldn't be snatching people who are people that are here that hadn't broken any laws, that had been here for many years. Let's keep this going. It sounds like we're on the right track. I would ask my colleagues on this committee and in the Republican conference to likewise follow the lead of their leader who said this and acted, more importantly, and she's been released as a part of that. She now has due process. That's all we're asking that people have is due process. Have an opportunity to defend yourself. If you are, in fact, someone that's been breaking laws and are habitual, that's another story. But if you've been here and you tried to go through the process, you should not be singled out. Mr. Beer, how has the Trump administration's immigration enforcement practice, such as denying access to legal counsel and expedited deportations without hearings, undermined basic due process and constitutional protections?
Look, this administration went to the Supreme Court with the proposition that they could grab anyone off the streets, put them on a plane with no hearing, no warning, and fly them to a foreign prison and put them there indefinitely and pay for it with U.S. tax dollars. They went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. You got to go back and give people due process. That's a good win. Unfortunately, they have tried to evade that ruling in every conceivable possible way, using other authorities to fly people to other countries. We have
a constitution for a reason.
We have a
rule of law for a reason.
We have a constitution.
The founders of our constitution were keenly aware that this day might come.
Yes, they were. Absolutely, they were. The problem we're facing is there's a lack of consequences when an administration or agents of the administration violate the Constitution. They can violate it with impunity, and as long as they can, they will.
I got about 36 seconds. I want to get a few more questions in. What does it mean for civil liberties in a democratic society when the Trump administration targets individuals for immigration enforcement based on political speech and activism, not because of anything else, just because they don't like what you said? This is America, right?
This is America, and in America, you don't need a passport to speak freely. And that is what it's coming to. If you can get a phone call from ICE to prove that you are a citizen and then therefore you have the right to say certain things critical of the government, we have degraded free speech for every single person.
Lastly, and I'm already over my time, so thank you, Mr. Chairman. ICE agents wearing masks without identifying badges or identification. We've seen people abuse this already. What risk do we have? And I'd ask each of the members to kind of chime in very briefly. When we have armed guards that don't wear any identification, that don't show a badge, that hide their faces, understand the argument that we have to protect the agents. But should there not be some duty to identify yourself as a duly appointed ICE agent to make sure that nefarious actors are not misusing this role to do things that are further illegal than we've already seen happen? Real quickly.
Yeah, we've already seen, as I said before, a huge number of cases around the country where people have impersonated ICE agents using masks, and it's a real problem in the country.
I assume they're doing it because they have a fear that that they could be targeted. Certainly, there are violent groups that have targeted ICE, and that's presumably.
So why don't all police officers do that?
I don't know that they're
because they're not being targeted.
Yeah, there's not.
Oh, you don't think police officers are being targeted? I beg to differ.
When was the last time a congressman?
We see police officers, we see police officers being targeted on the street of America every single day.
Gentlemen,
they don't cover their faces because they understand they have to protect and serve. My time is you. Thank you, sir. Your time is up too. Your time is up too, sir. Your time, sir. Your time is up. Reclaiming my time. Reclaiming my time. Your time is up. Reclaiming my time.
They're threatened.
You have no time, sir.
Themselves. It's
sir,
irresponsible.
You have no time.
Your own office.
You are not going to overspeak me, sir. When you're
well, you're doing it to me. So
well, you're not a member of Congress.
God bless you.
Gentlemen, if you both suspend. Chair now recognizes Representative Crane for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Mr. Cuccinelli, would you like to finish your thoughts?
Your first responsibility leading a law enforcement agency is the protection of your agents. That's first, because if you can't do it, it's like the first rule of first aid. You have to take care of yourself before you can take care of the person next to you. We all get that instruction on the plane flight every day, right? And that applies at an agency level as well. I cannot remember a time in my adult lifetime where one specific law enforcement agency was so personally targeted as ICE agents are being targeted today, including by members of this body. By members of this body who are willing to put at risk law enforcement officers that work for the federal government they are part of. And so, they have body cams. The people who go out on each, I'll call it a mission, are identified, meaning you can go back and figure out what agents were on that when they misbehave. I am not going to sit here and say police officers in any department never misbehave. They do. They're human beings and they make mistakes. And they do things wrong intentionally sometimes. I'm not going to say ICE agents do that. That didn't happen while I was a deputy secretary. And if you're not willing to protect your own agents, whether it's the Capitol Police or whether it's ICE, then you have no business sending them out on the street. That's immoral.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to Dr. Camarota. On January 16th, 2025, the Center for Immigration Studies posted the Beyond the Border podcast, episode 187, titled Why Legal Immigration Numbers Matter. You and my colleague, Representative Chip Roy, provided a detailed assessment of how U.S. Census Bureau data shows that President Trump handed Joe Biden a border that was under control. In fact, the data shows that international migrant crossings were at a 20-year low in Trump's final year in office. Joe Biden changed course in 2022 and increased the number of international immigrants to an all-time high. My question is this: would you agree the Biden admin failed to utilize their authority to detect, repel, detain, and deport illegal immigrants, and without the use of illegal parole, the U.S. Census data wouldn't have detected an increase?
Right, so in that data, just during the Biden administration, the foreign-born, that's all immigrants, grew by over 8 million, and more than 5 million, or about 2/3 of that increase in the data, and it misses people, is new illegal immigrants. And yes, the decision not to detain people, not to use expedited removal, to end the Remain in Mexico policy, to end the cooperation agreements we had with the Central American countries, and so on, caused a surge in illegal immigration. Most experts think illegal immigration, at least there was people coming and going in big numbers all the time, but it was roughly stable in the previous decade. But under President Biden, it grew 5 or 6 million. Now remember, some people went home, some got legalized, and that's a pretty conservative estimate.
Would you agree Democrats benefited from paroling illegal immigrants through increased population counted in the census and added seats for congressional representation?
Well, I have a very detailed study of that. Obviously, it didn't matter for 2020. It is true that as a general proposition that the arrival of immigrants in Democratic leading states tend to help Democrats. Also, the other big thing it does, it creates districts with relatively few citizens because the district lines are drawn based on total population. And those districts with relatively few American citizens do vote overwhelmingly Democratic, but that doesn't mean the illegals are voting or that the non-citizens are voting. It's just the people who live around them are very much Democratic. But it does increase Democratic representation, while the districts that are overwhelmingly comprised of American citizens tend to vote overwhelmingly Republican. So yes, there is a political dimension here. I'm not going to comment on the Democrats' motives, but that does happen.
Thank you. Mr. Cuccinelli, according to the Department of Homeland Security, until Joe Biden parole was rarely used, between 2014 and 2020, parole was used sparingly to admit between 11,000 and 54,000 immigrants each year. DHS data shows that Biden admin unlawfully expanded 2 parole programs that brought over 1 million illegals into the country under the auspice of legal process. The Cuban, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, or CHNV parole system, ballooned illegal parole numbers in conjunction with the use of the CBP One app. Between the 2 programs, an estimated 531,000 and 936,000 illegals were paroled into the U.S. just by registering for an asylum hearing. Additionally, DOJ data states that between 2021 and 2024, the number of absentee removal orders increased from under 50,000 prior to Biden to well over 200,000 under the Biden mass parole program, meaning that the parolees weren't returning to their hearings, just vanishing into the U.S. My question, do you believe former DHS Secretary Mayorkas was derelict in the oversight of DHS for agencies' unlawful use of the parole process?
Well, I would use the word derelict if this was unintentional. And then the answer would be yes.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter to the record. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter into...
Representative Carter, if we may, just trying to make sure I'm balancing everyone's time, and I gave you an extra minute. I'm trying to be careful.
I just want to introduce this to the record. I have no comment.
Ms. Johnson, would you yield? I'm about to recognize you. Would you yield to give him that opportunity to do so?
I don't think I have to yield my time.
Just to enter into the record? I shouldn't take away from her minutes. I'll be a moment.
I'll
Thank you,
allow
Mr.
it.
Chairman. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter a legal opinion from jail that found Mr. Cuccinelli did not lawfully serve in his position as Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security, as he stated. Thank you.
Without objection, so ordered. Ms. Johnson, you're now recognized for your 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to respond to a couple of the comments. The gentleman that was implying that illegal immigration benefited Democratic states is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of. I live in Texas. I don't think anyone can state that there's a state out there that has more immigrants in it than the state of Texas, and it's very Republican. It's very red, and I also resent the hell out of the comment. I'm a duly elected member of Congress by citizens of my district, and to imply that Democrats are not elected by citizens of this country is outrageous and offensive, and you should be ashamed of yourselves. Next, Mr. Chairman, recipients of humanitarian parole programs, they don't want to leave their countries. They're here because they are fleeing harm and persecution. And we are the United States of America. We're supposed to be a beacon of refuge, a place that says, give me your poor, you're tired, you're huddled masses. We're here. But we're neglecting these very words by virtue of this committee hearing and what's happening in this Congress. In May, the administration announced the termination of temporary protected status for our Afghan allies, the brave Afghans who put their lives on the line to support our U.S. troops. You give all this sanctimony about protecting our lines of enforcers of ICE, but what about the troops? What about the people who put their lives on the line in foreign countries and we had to solicit assistance from brave people in this country who risked their lives to make sure that our troops were safe and that our mission could be handled? And we said to them, if you help us, we will be there for you, but not anymore. So now, the U.S. is home to over 200,000 Afghan allies. President of the nonprofit Afghan evac and military vet Sean Van Dever said, we made a promise to our Afghan allies, and fulfilling that promise is not just a policy. It's about integrity. It's about honor and honoring the commitment. Thousands of troops are rallying behind our Afghan allies, because they know that countless American lives there were saved because of them and their bravery. They bled and died for our country, and how are we repaying them? By sending them back with a death sentence. I find that to be morally outrageous. It is wrong. What is happening? What is happening? All you who've served bravely in our military, who love to parade pomp and circumstance about the role and honor of our U.S. military, and here we have citizens of another country who will be killed and executed because they helped our men and women who bravely serve. That is not the America that we all know we should be. And I think to the other point, you're complaining about ICE and masks. I think it's wrong that ICE agents are masking themselves, hiding themselves, not properly identifying themselves. And the question is not, do you not support the men who serve in law enforcement in this country, because we all do? But maybe you should be questioning the mission. Why is there so much pushback? Why is there so much outrage of how they're handling their mission? Why are we not questioning that? I think we are. That the way they're doing it, by running up on people, by coming and attacking people who are in this country legally. This country said, yes, you have temporary protected status. Yes, you can come here. You've come the right way. And now we're saying, within very short notice, get the hell out. That is not fair. That is not right. That's putting these people who come here to fulfill their American dream, the tired, the poor, the huddled masses, come here and you can be free. It's just so wrong. And I think what we're seeing here is an outrage by the American people. And it's the leadership of this administration that is sending these agents into dangerous, harmful activities that are causing such a public outcry. Mr. Breyer, I have a question. Can you please explain the consequences for the lives of these Afghans and what's going to happen to them when America breaks its promise to them and sends them back to be executed in Afghanistan for helping the United States of America?
Yeah, so about 70,000 Afghans were paroled into the United States. They came legally during the evacuation. I guess the opposition to that would be that we should have left them all there to be killed. I prefer that we did what we did. Some bad actors were part of that group. We identified those people, and that's appropriate. That's what vetting should do. But the vast majority of the people that we evacuated were people that we should be protecting, and we should allow them to stay here permanently with a permanent status. We shouldn't have a temporary protected status. We should allow them to stay permanently, and there's legislation to do that.
Right, because the next...
gentlelady's time has expired. I now recognize Representative Knott for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, one of the great frustrations here is the conflation of legal immigration and illegal immigration. And the Democratic Party has made a habit of painting it with one swoop. Republicans are against all immigrants, and that could not be further from the truth. And as someone who worked over the last decade prosecuting illegal immigrant criminals, I can tell you I have zero problems with them wearing masks. We have organized crime, we have violent crime, we have international criminal operations that are here in this country, the likes of which few citizens can conceive of. And they perform counter surveillance, they are sophisticated, they're ruthless, and the level of violence that they operate in is a level that most Americans cannot conceive of. So I find it offensive that we are calling out our officers for protecting themselves. No, I will not. No, I will not. And this idea that we can bring as many people into this country from anywhere in the world, no matter where they come from, no matter what they believe, no matter what culture they hail from, without consequence, and truly that it will only benefit this country is just laughable. It's just laughable. We have 40 million illegal immigrants in this country. And we just have to ask ourselves, to Ms. Johnson, how many of the world's poor can we bring in here in addition to the legal immigrants, before the American economy, before Americans are harmed? We can't even take care of our own poor. And the thought that we could bring in millions and millions of illegals and it not have a detrimental effect in our country, I find it offensive. How many millions of low-skilled, illiterate individuals should we bring into the United States while our own children fall behind, while our own children are lagging in schools? Dozens of countries from around the world sanction extreme persecution for religious or political differences. Should we bring millions of those people into the United States? In many countries, you can be executed because you are a Christian, because you are a homosexual, because you disagree on a political matter. Should we bring 10, 20, 30, 50 million of those people into the country? This whole premise is absolutely outrageous, and the American people know that unchecked immigration on an illegal basis will bring this country to its knees. So conflating the two, illegal immigration, open borders, unchecked migration, mass migration into this country is only harmful. We could not be more robust in our favor for legal immigration. It is illegal immigration that we should be fighting against. The Democrats have not shifted 1 centimeter since November. They only advocate for open borders and unchecked illegal immigration, and I find it astounding. Now, Mr. Cuccinelli, there was a lengthy discussion earlier that said that the ICE officers who are bravely trying to eradicate some of these criminals and get them out of the country are only operating on the basis of race. Again, I've worked with them. I think that is a grotesque overstatement, but I'll let you respond to it.
So when I was the deputy secretary and overseeing ICE, any operation, they didn't just wake up one day and say, who are we going to get today? Investigation, research, and preparation goes into every field operation that you see and don't see.
Right.
People are not winging it. They're prepared, they're professionals. They do this for a variety of reasons. One, to preserve the safety of everyone going out, including the people they're going to encounter, by the way. You bring enough force to maintain the peace so that no one is tempted to be violent. That's part of the preparation, as you well know. They execute on that plan, and all the allegations here about, oh, they're just after this or that on that one sole thing, they just hitting people at Home Depot, that is just the biggest pile of horse manure I've heard in a long time.
Gentlemen, yield?
Nope. So, the comment was made, maybe it's the mission. I think she's right. That's not a reason, that's not a reason that law enforcement officers shouldn't be enforcing the law. You're Congress. If you don't like their mission, change the law. They are executing the law properly, and the whole question of masks, the fact that people in the federal government don't approve of ICE agents protecting themselves under situations, and let's be really clear here, they're not threatening ICE agents. They're threatening their families.
American citizens being arrested.
10 seconds.
Their families are being threatened.
And I will say, just in closing, Mr. Chairman, that there were roughly almost 3 million people granted temporary protective status. If each one of those people were given an hour, that's 330 years of government time to vet those people. I think it's laughable to assume that those people were properly vetted before they were brought into this country. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired and he yields.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Thander, you are recognized.
Mr. Chair, I would like to ask for unanimous consent to enter a statement for the record from the AFL-CIO that speaks to immigrants being vital members of the workforce.
Without objection, so ordered. I want to thank the witnesses for your time, your testimony, and the members for the questions and the dialogue. The members of the subcommittee may have some additional questions for the witnesses. We ask the witnesses to respond to these in writing. Pursuant to Committee Rule 7E, the hearing record will be held open for 10 days. Without objection, the subcommittee now stands adjourned.